Okay, so when I told my grandpa that he's a rabbi, that I would be speaking at Rosh Hashanah services, he got super excited because the joke that he would have put into his own sermon, he's now a retired rabbi, could actually go to use. And he was even more excited that his joke actually worked thematically with my idea. So I'll start with, upon my grandfather's advice, by telling you that one of the many names for Rosh Hashanah is Yom Ha'arichtah, which translates to a single long day. But this year, we cannot just say Yom Ha'arichtah, but we can say Shana Arichtah because it's been one heck of a long year. So thanks, Grandpa, for that one. So you might be thinking that it's interesting that Rosh Hashanah could be referred to as a single long day, because as you're probably aware, Rosh Hashanah is a 2-day holiday. But in fact, if you look in the text in Parshat Vayikra, it reads, "On the first of the month, you shall observe a cessation of work, a day of remembrance of the sounding of the shofar." The Torah actually only instructs us to celebrate Rosh Hashanah for 1 day. So then why is the Rosh Hashanah that we know always 2 days? The first mention of the celebration of Rosh Hashanah comes from the Mishnah, which was compiled around 200 CE, in which it mentions the observance of Rosh Hashanah as a 2-day holiday. As some of you may know, many of the holidays, such as Passover or Sukkot, are celebrated 1 extra day in the diaspora because of the extra day that it would take for the messengers to travel to spread news of the conclusion of the holiday. But interestingly, Rosh Hashanah is the only holiday for which we celebrate an extra day both in and outside of Israel. Back then, and to this day, our holidays are based off the cycle of the moon. Even though the lunar calendar is approximately 29 days, the Sanhedrin, which was a governing council of Jewish elderly, still declared months and holidays only on the basis of witnesses who would go out at night and look to see the new moon. And when the witnesses saw the beginning of the moon, the Sanhedrin would be able to declare the beginning of the new month. Only the Sanhedrin could declare the start of the new month and therefore the occurrence of Jewish holidays. Since the holidays are based off the moon cycle, Rosh Hashanah presents a particular challenge because it begins on the first of the month. In order for the Sanhedrin to declare that the new month Tishrei has begun and therefore Rosh Hashanah should be celebrated, they have to hope that the witnesses did not mess up in the counting of the 29 days between the last new moon. The Sanhedrin would count 29 days since the new moon of Elul. On the 30th day, if the witnesses still hadn't arrived, they would sanctify that day that they waited for the witnesses. If that night the witnesses came and saw the moon, the Sanhedrin would retroactively establish that day as Rosh Hashanah. If they did not see the moon, then the next day would be Rosh Hashanah. The Rambam writes, the festival of Rosh Hashanah was celebrated by the majority of the residents of the land of Israel for 2 days because they were in doubt as to when the festival began. That is, since Rosh Hashanah is the only festival celebrated on the first of the month. To address this issue, the ancient rabbis introduced a second festival day. This was a safety measure to ensure that the Jews would celebrate at least 1 day of Rosh Hashanah on the proper day. This system took into account the possibility that there had been a mistake in the counting of the month of Elul. Unlike other holidays that fall in the middle of the month, there would be no buffer time to figure out where the mistake had occurred and fix it before the holiday arrived. Yet, each year, the members of the council try to perfectly pinpoint the correct day of Rosh Hashanah. When the witnesses gathered to track the moon, the council members questioned them intensely to make sure that they didn't get it wrong and accidentally make Jews work on a holiday. Describing what happens upon arrival to the Sanhedrin, the Mishnah reads, "How did they test the witnesses? The pair which arrives first, they test them first. They bring in the older of them and say to him, 'Tell us, how did you see the moon? In front of the sun or behind the sun? To the north of it or to the south? And how high was it? And in which direction was it inclined? And how broad was it?' And then the next pair of witnesses would come in and the cycle repeats again and again." When I first read this, I was impressed by how precise and detailed these questions were. The council clearly wanted to be 100% sure that they were correctly spotting the beginning of the new moon as to not risk making people work on the holiday. But despite their deep level of questioning of these witnesses, built into the system was a possibility that they could actually make a mistake. I find this practice to be super bizarre. Even though a second day is added to the observance of Rosh Hashanah, the council members still try so extremely hard to get it right. I think all of us will remember celebrating Passover from within our quarantine. So clearly we could find meaning in the story and the struggle of the Exodus. I think for many, myself included, hope that this Rosh Hashanah, we could connect our lives in the pandemic by saying, okay, last year was terrible, but this is a new year. This Rosh Hashanah, we can start over. But that isn't really the reality that we're living in. In many ways, this Rosh Hashanah is not a new beginning at all. In fact, I've never felt more uncertain about the year to come, and the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg last night reinforces and heightens my fears and sadness. But I think understanding the celebration of Rosh Hashanah as a hope for certainty and stability helps us reckon with the uncertainty and anxiety about the year to come. For thousands of years, Jews have celebrated Rosh Hashanah not actually knowing which day it is on. But despite that uncertainty, they still try to get it right. I find comfort in knowing that as much as we try to get things right and be in control, we actually begin each year with a huge question. Which day is actually Rosh Hashanah? And we don't know. And built into this holiday is acceptance that we aren't going to know. But we don't just throw up our hands and say, let's not try to get it right. We question the witnesses. We track the lunar calendar. We do everything we can. I think we need to go into this era with the same framework. Even though we wake up every day with big questions, will there be a vaccine? Will we be returning to college? Who's going to be president? That doesn't mean that we still can't make goals for ourselves and try to find stability in the smaller aspects of life. Now more than ever, we need to be accountable to ourselves, our families, and our communities. And I also think this teaches us that even though this year we particularly feel uncertain and worried, that this is not a new feeling. Every year we have questions and worries. That's just a part of what it means to start something new or begin a new year. We should find validation and power in this ancient tradition that understands and is okay with big questions, but still requires of us that we don't just resign ourselves to those uncertainties. This year, I will continue to grow my relationships. I will talk to my sister who's studying in Israel every day. I will go outside every morning. I'll keep checking in with my friends and my parents and my grandparents. I'll keep learning how to cook with my roommates. I'll vote. I'll watch stand-up comedy on Netflix. And I'll keep working on my Jewish identity and practice. There is a lot I don't know, but that's not a reason to not hold myself accountable to larger goals and daily routines. Even more, it's meaningful that this holiday and at large our Jewish calendar places such importance on the power and significance of witnessing. And I think we need to embrace that part of our religion right now. We need to be actively witnessing and leaning into this moment as much as possible. Since March, every time my mom sees something symbolic of this moment, she takes a picture. Her camera roll is filled with pictures of signs, funky masks, quarantine memes, and sanitizing stations in front of stores. As a historian who studies the Great Depression and has spent hours and hours staring at the image of the migrant mother, she understands the importance of capturing this moment. When we look back at this time, we don't want to let our fear or our uncertainty lead us to become ignorant and become unaware of the real struggles that we're facing as a country. Nor can we use these things as an excuse to not act, to not engage, to not push back against injustice. So, on the beginning of the second night of Rosh Hashanah, I hope that you can take some time to think about the things that make you nervous for this year, the big questions that you have, while also figuring out how you're going to establish a sense of normality, peace, and happiness as well. Shana Tova.